And then how many years? 100 years? 75? Yeah, 75 years. Yeah, that was kind of. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, go up to anything like in the 70s, 60s, 50s. I would think you'd have to be talking about somewhere in the 20s, you know, and maybe the early 30s.
We ready? Okay. You will get started here, and I'm going to go to get into flag football so I can miss all the meetings like Mose does.
Is that his argument?
That's
Is
his
that story?
argument. Yeah. Okay, well, good evening. It is 5:30 p.m. on Tuesday, September 16th, 2025, and this regular meeting of the Sandpoint Planning and Zoning Commission is now called to order in the council chambers at City Hall, 1123 West Lake Street, Sandpoint, Idaho. For the record, I am Vice Chair Wayne Benner, presiding. Also present are Commissioners Grant Simmons, Scott Topey, Reed Weber, and Ivan Remar. If everyone will now please stand, we'll recite the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, do any of the commission members have any announcements or reports? Geez, none? Okay, we'll move on to the consent calendar. And we will now proceed with the consent calendar. And at this time, I will entertain a motion to approve the consent calendar as presented.
Motion to approve.
Been moved.
Second.
And seconded. Then roll call. Okay, just all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Okay, the motion has passed. Okay, the matters from the public and general public comments. Next, we will proceed with matters from the public. If you would like to speak on a topic included on the agenda that is not a public hearing or another topic pertinent to city business, now is your opportunity to do so. If you wish to speak and haven't yet completed a sign-up form, please do so and hand to the staff. The forms are located on the table by the doors. If you're attending remotely and wish to speak on a matter that is not on the agenda, please raise your hand on Zoom at this time. Is there anybody on Zoom?
Nobody on Zoom, but we do have a in-person resident.
Okay. Okay, I just would like to make everyone aware that the city does have a policy on public meeting decorum. The rules are posted on the wall just outside the council chambers entrance door. In summary, I would ask everybody to be pleasant and respectful, not make derogatory statements about others, including city staff, not be disorderly or disruptive, no calling out, clapping, or holding up signs, etc. Please note the commission cannot take testimony on any subject, any specific planning or land use related matter or application outside of official public hearing. So at this time, is there any general comments, topics not included on the agenda and for comments only?
We have city resident Carrie Logan.
Good evening, Carrie Logan. I live in the city of Sandpoint. Just for clarification, so this is the time to make a comment on your new business discussion of commercial A zone and historic preservation. Or are you going to take comment during that period?
Well, because we don't have many people here, we can start with it right now, I would say.
Okay.
Yeah. No.
Okay, so I'm not aware of the kind of thinking on behalf of the commission and staff as to the scope of the, I think you're talking about an overlay district. But just generally, if you are doing an overlay district downtown, that's great. But be sure to include properties other than what is in the defined historic preservation district downtown, the historic district. For example, the properties on the east side of First Ave that aren't on the register, and I'm talking primarily about the ones between the Canada and Bridge Street. I think those properties are really vulnerable to massive development, 65-foot type thing. And I would hope within the scope of your overlay, you will be reducing the heights allowed in that particular area. In fact, all of the overlay, because the city historically cannot tolerate that kind of height. Then my second point is expediency. I would hope this had been done yesterday because you have to have, your code in place before people come forward with projects and have some ability to say no to 65-foot height. So I would really hope you do this sooner rather than later. But again, please include all the properties downtown, whether they're within the historic district or not, because, you get 65-foot buildings down there. We're going to have a tunnel on First Ave. Thank you.
Thank you, Karen. Anyone else signed up to speak at this time?
No, Mr. Chair.
Okay, there may be some comments during the time frame. I can tell. Okay, if there's no one else to speak in the public comment, and we have no public hearing and no old business, we will start with the new business. And that will be the discussion of commercial A zoning and historic preservation. And I turn the matters over to staff to start the discussion, please.
Thank you, Chair. Good evening, Commissioners. It's nice to be with you again. Thank you so much for taking time out of your busy lives to sit here and help us shape our future. This is it's an exciting conversation. And thank you to folks who are here participating. I think it's great when we have people participate in these discussions and ultimately the decisions that we have to make. It just furthers the idea that we're going to have the right outcome when we have more people involved. Really what I want to do this evening is just have a conversation. There's been so much work done. When I first was asked to look into this a year ago, I didn't get much of a chance because all of a sudden I've got all these things that I got pulled into and said, okay, we'll do historic when we get time. And now that I've gotten a couple of those things through the gauntlet, a lot of development processing, a lot of working on the parking ordinance, things like that. Now I've got time to dive into historic. So I did a little bit of a dive, and I was really impressed with the fact that we have already, as a community, you have already done an enormous amount to prepare for this next step. And I want to spend some time tonight talking about what this next step is, because it's really standing on the foundation of a ton of work that's already been done. We don't have to go back to the beginning and relitigate all these discussions that may have happened. It's been work for 5, 6, 7 or more years specifically to try to put in place an historic district that have some rules. So I did have the benefit of I was able to get on the agenda for the Historic Preservation Committee. It was a way of just introducing myself to them last week and talking briefly about what I think the next step needs to be. And I really kind of want to replicate that conversation here with you so that you can have an understanding of where I think we need to go in the next steps. There's going to be plenty of opportunity to talk about the specifics of development standards and design guidelines and things like that. But really what's needed right now in all of the things that I read from these past PowerPoints that have been presented over the years, we have to get something in the zoning ordinance. Unless it's in the zoning ordinance, it's not going to happen. We have these aspirational statements in our comp plan. A lot of work's been done to create an historic district, a lot of good, hard work. But the way development happens, though, unless you have a zoning standard adopted, and you're coming through for a land use permit, for example, you're not going to be required to adhere to these standards that reside, outside of broad policies that reside outside of the zoning ordinance. So it's really, really going to be a conversation about zoning. And this commission is uniquely situated in that all zoning matters regarding, what happens in Title IX have to come through this commission, in terms of a recommendation on the way to council. So we've got some work to do, but it's discreet. What I want to do is I couldn't do these presentations without Jason, right? So we were looking through the files today, just at all these exhibits and things that have been squirreled away, but haven't made their way into the zoning ordinance. And I just want to start by showing the zoning map of the city, if you can find that. Here it is. The reason why I want to start with this map is because really what we're talking about when we're talking about historic preservation, the task that's before us is to put in place rules in your zoning ordinance such that we have a mechanism to implement guidelines and have some authority reviewing projects against those guidelines such that we avoid things we're trying to avoid and we preserve things that we're trying to preserve. And we can have a wide-ranging discussion about that. But I pull up the zoning map because really, for historic preservation, we're talking about a very small section or portion of your commercial zoning in the city. This map is the zoning map. The white areas are residential single family. The blue areas are residential multifamily. And then you've got a couple other flavors here. All the purple stuff is your commercial A, commercial B is in orange, and commercial C is in green. You have an enormous amount of commercial zoning. And what's interesting is you actually get into the development standards. You look and read through that zoning ordinance, and you look at the allowable uses and allowable things. There's very little variation between green, purple, and orange. Very little. So it stands to reason that we could be frustrated with some outcomes of development if really want one portion of the city to have to adhere and have a different sort of outcome as a result of our policies. But right now, all of that very similar in terms of what the zoning ordinance allows and requires. So the principal thing you're going to do with historic preservation is you're going to say, well, there's a portion of the city that's special. And you've already done that. We're going to pull up the guidelines, the diagram that came out of the recently adopted comp plan a year ago, July. That's not it. It's
You dropped.
I dropped it in the folder. It's help if I put my glasses on.
Expanded disrupt.
That one right there. Nope, that one right there. That's it.
Here we go.
Okay, so this is taken out of the comp plan, and this is based on work that's been discussed through workshops, and I'm certain the Planning Commission as well as Historic Preservation Commission, maybe other committees and commissions as well. You have a National Registered Historic District that was expanded in 2018 that includes the hatched area. You also have this area that's called Historic Downtown. You'll notice both of these geographies are not segregated out or called out in any way differently on your zoning map. You don't have rules in place other than what you see in the comp plan. You have no rules in place to say this is different. So what we want to do is we want to introduce those rules so that we can begin to layer in the appropriate level of requirement. And I believe what we're going to do is we're going to start with the way I see this going forward is we're going to bring forward an ordinance that would add this hatched area in the outline, forward an ordinance that would be shown on the zoning map with an H as an historic overlay. Overlay districts are basically, you have the base zone district standards, and then on top of that zoning district or some specific geography, you drape another set of policies and requirements. Sandpoint has an overlay around the airport. It's common for cities with airports to have an overlay zoning district because you've got these specific things that happen around airports. There's other restrictions that have to do with the numbers of people that are congregating per acre that are interesting to the FAA and whatnot. So it can have an effect on zoning, can have an effect on permitting, effect on building heights, things like that. No different than what we'd be doing in the downtown is saying, okay, this is a recently adopted boundary that is meaningful to the community because it's been through so much public process to arrive in the comp plan. We'd be lifting this geography, establishing by ordinance that this is now the historic overlay. So I'll be bringing you an ordinance not in pieces. I'm going to bring the whole thing together in one shot. So we see the whole of it, but you're basically going to be putting a geography on the map with an H on it, saying this is the historic overlay. And that's a signal that some additional rules apply. The blue area is the historic downtown, and that's a little bit different from what I've read and what I'm learning through the policy documents that we do have, is that what I gather is that this is an area where some level of additional design guidelines are perhaps necessary, but might not rise to the level of needing to have the specific requirements of the historic overlay be placed upon them. Take a quick pause. And what am I saying? Does it make sense so far, what I'm saying? And this is familiar, hopefully, to some of you who have been on these commissions for a while. You've seen these images before. You've seen the boundaries of the overlay.
We got into this with the comp plan and we knew that we were going to have to chat about it in a year or two.
Well, we're going to rip off the Band-Aid and do the tough work now, because we're going to put it in the zoning ordinance, and it's going to be, this is where the rubber meets the road. And once we do that, we're all aware that these are now standards that are going to have to be adhered to. So let me talk a little bit about that. We're going to talk about the geography of this area in just a moment, but what I want you to visualize is now, let's say, for example, last night we adopted this hashed area as an overlay. We need to pour into that, dump into the zoning ordinance, the rules, process-wise, number one, and number two, outcomes in terms of what we expect for outcomes. And that's going to be in terms of standards that we write. So in addition to what you have in your commercial A zoning, there's going to be the requirement that there's a different process development has to follow for this area. And we're going to talk a little bit about that. And then there's going to be a different set of rules. Now, with historic preservation, we're talking about things that don't customarily reside in a zoning ordinance. Colors of paint, types of brick, window fenestration, things that an architect, like one of our commissioners, could probably articulate much more clearly than I could. That stuff naturally should be outside your zoning ordinance in a set of council-adopted historic preservation guidelines that are applicable only to this hatched area. In a zoning ordinance, we'll make that connection. You've got a zoning ordinance, it's now got a historic overlay. The overlay in the text of the ordinance says, by the by, development here has to adhere to these guidelines. And we're going to fuss over these guidelines because I'm going to bring you a draft after I work with the Historic Preservation Commission on it, and we're going to see if it's the right set of guidelines for the city. So we are going to spend some time as a commission talking about what should be in those guidelines. There's plenty of other examples from other cities. There's no reason we have to reinvent the wheel. We just need to make sure that whatever we put in place is really specific to our community and the uniqueness that we experience when we're downtown in this, specifically in this area. Procedurally, the permit, the process that is followed nationwide, statewide, regionally, and now if we adopt it locally, will be, in addition to whatever building permit you have to get or land use permit you have to get, there will be what's called a certificate of appropriateness. Okay, if you're going to have these standards in place, it stands to reason that there be some review such that we can assure that they're adhered to. And the reason why it's important to have this separate permit is because when you apply for a building permit, if you meet the building code, guess what? You get the permit. You got to meet the building code to get a building permit. But if we have additional standards that we want to adhere ourselves to, you need to have some mechanism to ensure that's going to happen. The things that happen in historic preservation, a lot of them are not even going to require a building permit. Painting a building. Imagine a set of guidelines that says, thou shalt not paint over a stucco building. Now, that doesn't require a building permit to get paint. But if we have historic preservation ordinance, it really needs to go with the permit so that any modifications that are done to these structures on the exterior are evaluated against those and then either approved or modified and then approved or denied or whatever. So we're going to talk about what that looks like. Anytime we introduce a new permit, we need to make sure that it's right size for the task. Anytime you're putting additional requirements on, you have to be mindful that on the other end of this, there's the business There's someone who's trying to make a living by occupying the structure, making modifications to make it work. So we have to go into this mindful that these are additional rules that you'd be applying here, and we have to make sure that we're efficient in how we size and create these new requirements. But that's essentially what it is. The blue area outside, I visualize would have another set of guidelines that would be sort of downtown design guidelines, not necessarily historic preservation minded, but to fill in some of the vacant parcels, things would have to develop with a particular character that we all agree on, through council approval would be the set of appropriate guidelines. That's what I visualize. So I'm going to take a quick pause and see if everybody's tracking with me on what we're at the staff level about ready to start producing.
And then separately, will you also have separate guidance for the other commercial districts to be able to create separation? Or is that a separate task then again?
Good question. So right now in the zoning ordinance, you have a threshold for a land use permit that we go through kind of review. If you're a single family home or just a commercial building under 2,000 square feet, you just get a building permit and you're off to the races. You have to get a land use permit called a site plan review if you're more than a duplex, if you're triplex or more, or if you're over 2,000 square feet. The code currently has a number of standards in there about building location, about landscaping, a number of standards, building height, obviously, things like that, that projects have to adhere to. What this suggests to me and what the comp plan sort of speaks to is the fact that we would improve upon those standards. And probably the best way to do that is take those standards that are really architectural and site plan oriented, leave the base things in that talk about where buildings have to be situated on lots, but try to pull out the architectural details, things that don't belong in the zoning ordinance, and put them in standalone design guidelines that are going to be related to permits that fall within that blue area.
That you can refer to.
That you can, they'll be incorporated by reference. Somebody comes in and says, I want to do a new hotel. I want to be located at 5th and Oak. Great. Here's the permit you need to receive, which is the site plan permit already on the books. And by the by, here's the downtown design guidelines against which we'll evaluate you. You want to do that same hotel a few blocks to the east, now within the district, different set of rules. There's going to be a different set of guidelines. They're going to be historic minded. So the outcome of whatever happens on a site there might be a little bit different than you'd see in the blue, because it's going to be very trying to be in keeping with historic nature of that area. And before you can go move forward, you're going to have a sign off on what's called the certificate of appropriateness. We have to discuss as a community who issues that permit. Is it something like this planning commission signs off on conditional use permits? Is a certificate of appropriateness something that's done at the staff level, or is that brought to the Historic Preservation Commission, right? Right now, my tendency is to have that done at the Historic Commission level. Have the talented staff capabilities of that commission weighing in on these applications to say yes or no, or please modify and adjust. Make no mistake, it's a permit, right? So we have to be mindful that we call it a certificate of appropriateness because that's the term that's used, but I really think it's, to get our mind around it, it's a permit. So you can need to get a permit. And the flavor of guidelines that fall in the hatched area would be naturally a little bit different than they would be stuff that's outside. I think there was another question over here, Chair.
Well, I have two, and they're kind of procedural things. First is looking at the map in the hatched area. Two parts to this question. One is this fixed, or do we or some part of the city, this commission or some other part of the city, have the authority to modify what eventually will be the historic overlay area?
All zoning is local.
Okay, so there's nothing fixed about this, because I have questions about, as was pointed out by the comment earlier, it looks like the white line headed straight up is First Avenue, and where it says W.A. Byrne Building, on the east side of that road, there's nothing. I mean, it's not in the district. And on the east side of the road, south of, I don't know if it's the Panda or not, it's so skinny, that's not any building at all. So I don't,
Yeah. So I think we should talk about this at some length right now.
Okay.
I think I want to talk about this at some length right now for a number of reasons. But first, Jason, do you want to start with this, or do you want me to start with this?
It might help to go to Street View.
Well, let me just say this first of all. So first of all, naturally having this recently minted 14 months, 15 months ago, naturally staff's going to look at this and say, this is sort of, resolved. My understanding is that there's a number of structures that are on the east side of Hearst that are not indeed historic. They're built in the 70s, yet they're adjacent. So I think the question becomes, it's sort of a binary question. Are they historic or not? Should they be in this historic district? And then the next question would be, if they're not, well, what can be done to ensure that the development that happens here is compatible with what we're trying to do across the street?
Yeah, yeah.
So, yeah, we can write zoning rules that, for example, suggest that things that are within a certain distance of this boundary are limited in height to a certain height, or anything we can design. I'm just reluctant to second guess this map now. I rather ask ourselves, what are we nervous about, and what can we do with our zoning ordinance to sort of inoculate against that?
Well-
And that's how I rather handle it.
Okay, I don't want to debate, but I do have questions about what the overall intent of this is. Is it to preserve old buildings, or is it to create a harmonious sort of district that looks like it's been there a while? I mean, it has historic character.
Good, because the zoning, all zonings have a purpose statement at the top of the zone district. I think the overlay needs to have a purpose statement. I think we're going to borrow a lot from the comp plan. There's this pendulum in historic preservation from, locked in amber to, make sure it's sort of compatible in the eyes of what the guidelines would suggest is compatible. Some are basically just don't stucco over the buildings, please. Others are, no, it's got to be this color paint. Okay. So it gets into all kinds of level of details architecturally. We have to arrive what is sensible for this community in fuss over the purpose statement. And I'll be drafting one based on everything I see in the comp plan and the work that's been done, and we'll take that to Historic Commission, take it here, and fuss over it until we think that the purpose statement is right. And I'm going to be asking the commission, both commissions, to what degree are we locking ourselves in amber versus providing guidance to ensure that things look a certain way, right? That's really what this is about. I mean, there's no need to put fancy words on it. That's what this is about. And part of that naturally is, well, gosh, if we're trying to look at downtown and we look at the building heights here, for example, I think we've been asked, how is it compatible if you have 65 feet on one side of the street, but have this historic preservation on the other, where the light might be considerably less. Zoning allows us to craft what it is that we're aspirational to, what we're aspiring to achieve. So I think we need to go into this with an informed decision about what would be reasonable against the boundaries of that hatched area. I think you need to understand a little bit about construction costs. I think we need to understand a little bit about what the vision is for Sand Creek. There's a lot that goes into that. I don't think that's certainly not something we're going to resolve tonight. I did incidentally, because building heights are obviously going to be an important topic here. I went down this morning and measured some building heights. Just for the record, it's kind of fun to remind ourselves of what some of these building heights are. So I went down to Gunnings Alley and I measured the back of the panda, the blank face of the rear of the building. That's 50 feet tall. The church just the south of that, the backside of the church, is 45 feet tall, the one that's got the elevator on the back. Interestingly, the largest building around is the Powerhouse building, right next to Powder Round Pizza and the Verizon or AT&T store is there. That building is 55 feet tall on its southeastern corner. And the largest building of all, which is outside of this entirely, is the Granary, which is just over 80 feet. And I took a laser pointer out there this morning with our building official just to, because I want to keep repeating these numbers. I think it's important. I think we need to, cities are in a lot of ways a reflection of the decisions of our past and the measurements of our spaces. So let's go measure them. To make sure that what we put in place for tomorrow is is what we want. So let's go into this knowing what these things are. We're not going to resolve the building height issue today. I will say that, yes, this boundary can be changed if we want to. I'm remiss to jump into that if really what the objective is to make sure something that's across the street is compatible. There's other tools. I don't want to call something historic just because we're really trying to achieve something else.
And just to
Okay.
clarify, in response to Commissioner Torby's question, right? There's no proposal on the table at this time to copy and paste this boundary and make this our overlay district. This is just the line around those buildings that are either in the National Register of Historic Places or potentially could be in the National Register of Historic Places. But being a nationally recognized historic site provides zero protection or guarantee that there will be preservation of that structure. That's where the local ordinances come into place.
That's right.
If we want to take these historic buildings that we know exist and preserve them architecturally, we need rules that guarantee that that will happen. But historic preservation and historic design guidelines are totally different things. Historic design guidelines assure that new development, respects some character that of a foregone era, of a century ago, if that's what we determine is historic.
And where does that apply? Does that apply to the
There's-
broader blue
there-
areas or to
there's
the hatched
nothing
area?
right now. We don't have anything right now.
But we would create it for
Right.
that hatched area.
What Bill's suggesting is that one starting point for this effort is to look at the outline around our historic structures that we know exist downtown, the hashed area, and say that could be where we have historic preservation guidelines. Are there other, Mayor Logan mentioned there might be some structures on the east side of First Avenue that we should consider for historic preservation as well. They aren't on this map currently. Whether, where does history begin? Where does history end, right? If something was built in the 70s following a fire north of the Canada, is that a historic structure? Or does something have to be from the 30s or the 1910s to be considered a historic structure? So once we have historic preservation standards in place, it limits the owners of those properties' ability to deviate from the historic structure that they now own. Whereas if it's not a historic structure and it's not protected in our code, anything can be leveled and any structure can be put up. Now, when we have historic design standards, that might include the whole blue area, for example, or any other area that this commission or city council determines should be the historic design area. That's where we can go beyond what's in our current code. Currently, we have design standards, but they're not described as historic design standards. You're all familiar with them. It's the percentage of the street frontage that must be made up of windows, for example, to prevent solid walls like we see all over downtown from structures that were built before these design standards were in place. The materials, you can't have more than 10% of your external material can be metal, for example, without waivers from the commission or from staff. So we have standards, but they're not historic design standards. They're not even described as that. They're just sort of aesthetic, but what's the basis on which they were adopted?
So
Certainly not historic design.
So what we're going to do, because I think one of the commenters said, hey, there's a sense of urgency. There is. I've seen there's been so much work and it just hasn't gotten to the zoning piece, which is the last piece. So let's do it. So I'm going to put together guidelines for historic, guidelines for downtown, a zoning overlay district. And we will have this conversation with something tangible to touch. I just want to forecast that's what we're up to. I think that's where this community is. If we were just starting this effort, that's not what we would do. We'd have workshops like you've had in the past. You do all the work you've done, right? I don't think we need to replicate that unless I hear otherwise. I don't think we need to. I think we take stock of where we left off, which wasn't that long ago, and let's see what this zoning looks like, and then not push it on to city council and forward it to city council until we're happy with it, right? And that's gonna be through both commissions. I'm toying with the idea of perhaps having a joint session that's very much similar to this conversation with the Historic Preservation Commission and council and you all together, just to say, look, we're about ready to invest a lot of staff time bringing you something. We don't want to do it unless this is what you want. But I get the sense this is exactly what has been asked for, because just based on what I see in the record. So that's where we are with this.
Yeah, Mr. Chair.
You wait a second.
Hit me.
I'd approach the chair to see if I can speak.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. I mean,
I said Mr.
these
Chair.
guys absorbed about 45 minutes. I think my throat's getting dry.
Ivan, would you like to go?
Anyway, yes, I would.
Hit it.
Anyway, I like what's going on. So historical preservation stuff, great. I personally have worked with historical societies, not here, but in Colorado. And, there are some issues with them. They're often well-intentioned.
Mhm.
But the biggest concern I have, I made some notes here, but you already have it. One is to define the area, and I mean, it's got to be tight, define the area. Age, these are the things that are pretty straightforward. Construction type, code adjustments, which will have to be made regardless if it's historical or not. The International Building Code is not going to allow you to change an exit size because it's an historical building.
Mhm.
You're still going to have to come up with that. Lot sizes, but one of the biggest things I see the problems I've had with them in the past is that the people that compile these commissions without a really defined scope of what they can and cannot agree to, it can often become subjective. Or I mean, objective. Maybe I got it wrong.
Subjective.
Subjective, yeah. Anyway, and that leads to a lot of problems, because it won't make common sense, but yet, people will dig their heels in, and this is what they want. And being a contractor at the time, a lot of time and a lot of money for the client can be chewed up while you're trying to determine, how to make windows operable, but make them look like they were installed in 1898 by a drunk miner. I mean, because understand this. I mean, the turbine stands a real good possibility of being historical, and seriously. So, I mean, you see, my point is that
I do.
it's you're almost going to need something. It's going to be almost as tough, although more defined, as a comprehensive plan. I mean, it's going to be like a mini Boy Scout manual. I mean, it's going to say, this is what you can't consider. This is what you can't consider.
That's a
One of the
awesome. I so appreciate the comment about the possible conflicts with the building code, because one of the individuals that's going to be involved in this next step is our chief building official, Pete Scahn, mainly at the staff level as we digest various examples of historic preservation guidelines and things like that, and just try to learn what has been a best practice in that realm and what hasn't. So there's some work that the staff has to do to sort of understand that a little bit better. But point well taken. Anytime you introduce a new permit, you've got to be mindful what you're doing. So I think what you've said is very much on our minds as we contemplate the standards and how that permit needs to be fairly discreetly tailored so it doesn't become something that's impossible to get.
But could you were discussing putting a group together at some point to just discuss the various things. I would think, and I mean, I know I'm no great fan of meetings, except for this one. I'm in love with it. But, sometimes they can be productive, sometimes they can't. But at the same time, I think we really need representation, I think, from both contracting world and the realty world up here to just bring some pragmatism to some of these decisions.
Yeah. No, I agree. This affects everybody. It's not just the property owner. It's not just the people who go to experience the downtown. There's a lot involved here.
Okay.
So I appreciate that. We have to do this mindfully. I'm just trying to impress upon you that I understand my marching orders, which is to get this done. And so I want to write something and bring it to these two commissions fairly soon, within the next couple of months, to have this thing really, truly, digested and combed over.
But resident of West Sandpoint, we have recently had some projects that were rushed and got pushed along pretty quick.
Yeah, this has been characterized a little differently to me.
Okay.
This is the one that is sort of failure to launch. It's been all the prep has been done. We just couldn't quite get to this last piece. So, but look, I'm going to take my direction from council, obviously, on this. And then my objective is to put in place something that the Historic Preservation Commission and the Planning Commission understands and can support recommending to City Council. That's what my objective is. I don't have a particular standard I have in mind, a particular process. I'm reading what this community's done, and it's done a lot. And it's a great foundation. So it's easy for me to pick it up from here and say, great, I mean, the overlay is fairly discrete exercise to write. It's the standards that are going to be a little more difficult. And by the way, just to comment on, there's no really neat place to put this in our zoning ordinance. We have a chapter 9.9. It's called zoning administration. It talks about how you administer your zoning ordinance. I put it in a Word document and I deleted all of it, and I'm rewriting the whole thing because that's what's needed we have to contemporize this chapter to understand each and every permit that the city has. And this needs to be brought forward in that context. If we don't do that, it's going to be this weird new thing stuck with this bunch of old stuff. So I'm rewriting the whole chapter, about halfway done with it now. That's something I'm going to share with both commissions to say this. And there's not a single standard in there. It's just how we organize administering our zoning ordinance. And we're going to introduce a new permit called Certificate of Appropriateness. Who approves it? Who's the appeal authority? What's the application process look like? You know, all those details that you need to have fairly well spelled out. So some of the stuff's not very well spelled out right now in the code. So I'm just fixing it and bringing it forward for all the permits. There's 10 or so permits that are implicated here. So I'm doing it for all of them. So they all have very clear standards of how you move to the next step. The guidelines and the zoning and the building heights and the standards, that's where I think the real discussion is going to be. But I'm going to show you what a contemporary organization of a zoning administration chapter looks like, because it's time to have an update to that. It's perfect time for it.
Mr. Chair. Yeah, my question was, so in terms of next steps, so a few questions here. In terms of next steps, what I'm hearing is you're going to take a stab at some frameworks and some language, high level is probably where we'll
No, it's
start.
going to be detailed.
We're
Yeah.
going to get in the weeds. Okay. And then talk about how you want to sort of get that in front of the right stakeholders. Is it just planning and zoning? Is it the commission? Is it independently? Pulling us all together is probably a great idea. It's also probably untenable.
Well, I think I'm going to start, Commissioner, I'm kicking around the idea of having doing upfront right now with city council sometime in October with you and city council and historic preservation, if I can get it on the calendar. Logistically, that's hard to do.
Yeah.
But I'd like to have a very similar conversation to what we're having now, and just let everybody kind of understand and react and sort of see if we can't coalesce around nodding our heads and yeah, this sounds like this is the right direction. Anytime you're tinkering with the zoning ordinance, even if we've done a lot of background work, we've got to make sure we bring the right folks along. But I am relying on the fact we have these commissions. We do have this body. It's a well-known body. It's well publicized. People understand it. They participate remotely. They know it's here. There's a lot of value, I think, in making this a principal place where this is going to be discussed, in addition to the Historic Preservation Commission, which is in a different time of the day, which may be more suitable to other members of the community. So the question outside of that is, what other groups? I think it's a good idea to talk with people who build things, and to talk with the realtor community. I think that's a fantastic idea, because there's a reality check there in terms of just like the building code, especially. That's a very good comment that we should be mindful of, to make sure that we're not putting something that's impossible to implement, or what it means to do that, or what clues we can put into the guidelines that suggest these portions of the building code are getting to be paid, specific attention to. So I've got a little bit of work on that. So I think there's some opportunity for some stakeholder, outreach there. I'm going to rely on the fact that this has been through significant community process already to arrive at these boundaries. I will hear very quickly from the Historic Commission and this commission if those boundaries we just showed, that were just recently adopted, aren't the right ones. But I don't think it's a fair thing to look at until you see what gets poured into those boundaries. So I want to bring both together.
Yeah. So along those same lines, when we were working on the comp plan,
Yep.
we knew that we were going to have to put some meat on these bones.
Yep.
At some point in time. And so I'm wondering if there's opportunities to further flesh out the appendices and schedules in the comp plan to give us a backstop when we have to make decisions. Meaning there's a lot of stuff that we haven't built out in the comp plan in terms of what we...
Oh, like a timeline to get this done?
No. Well, I'm talking the specific, how we think of historical preservation and how we think of history in Sandpoint.
Okay.
As living in the comp plan to give us a backstop when we have
Sure.
zoning.
Yep. So what we'll do when we come forward with the sketch of what this might look like and some guidelines to fuss over, we'll have some comp plan policy and reference so that you have an
Yeah, I
understanding.
guess my point is we didn't spend as much time on that as we may have liked to.
Right.
And it felt like we probably could have spent another couple weeks on it.
I don't want this to be rushed, but I do want to get something before you quickly.
Yeah.
And how much time we spend on it's different than
Yeah.
how much time it takes to get it to you. I want to get it to you quickly, and then we can spend some time fussing over it. I just really want to, I want there to be a sense of urgency to this, because that's really what I've been asked to do.
Okay, and then if we're getting in the weeds on these, on the actual language
Yeah.
that we might see next time, I might suggest that, and we're gonna hear this notion of height come up again and again.
Oh
and
yeah,
again,
this is gonna be a biggie.
is that we think of it more in terms of context than
Yeah.
actual absolute height. Because a 65-foot building only looks weird if the thing next to it isn't, or is completely out of context, meaning as we start to grow, can we manage it through context heights? And
We're
I'd
gonna-
be
yeah.
curious to hear from like Reed and an architectural point of view on that. Because I think there's probably some other ways to manage it other than just caps on heights. You know what I mean?
Sure. Yeah.
Yeah.
I was gonna jump in anyways. Just the thoughts on the overlay zone as you have it. I think that being very specific and based on the National Historic Register and buildings specifically doesn't necessarily reflect like the urban form that locals desire in this area. It's just these buildings had to fit this strict criteria, but then those buildings across the street were built 20 years later or whatever it is, even though they kind of match that same downtown historic quality. So I think there's like a general, like there's historic preservation of buildings, then historic preservation of massing and design and public space around the buildings. I think that's something that could be missing if you just outline those specific buildings. But if you're saying there may be ways to expand that boundary based on some code or some language in the code, saying adjacent buildings across the street, like for First Avenue, for example, extending all the way through on the whole east side. There's a pretty good diagram in the phase 3 for the design competition that does show it continuing all the way through this historic overlay and coming up Cedar a little bit. And then as you get further between 2nd and 5th Avenue, maybe more of a standard urban form like has been in the code for a while now could exist. But there's something about the importance of just Main Street, First Avenue, Cedar, kind of a little bit of Main as a main street downtown. I think that's, yeah, way more important to talk about, but I think that should be captured as a historic overlay zone.
Yeah, that's kind of what I appreciate the comment. It's gonna be tough to really, I think, get into this in any more meaningful way than that until we have something to look at. I have in my mind's eye 2 sets of design standards, one that's really preservation minded and another that's sort of downtown minded, that's outside the district. Because that's what I see in the policies. But when we look at them, let's see if they achieve the objective. In the end, did they achieve the objective, right? And then we couple that with whatever rules and regulations we want to have in the zoning ordinance itself, which are going to be the more things related to building height, basic form, parking certainly is dealt with already in there. So some of the sort of hard parameters are going to be in the zoning ordinance, but what the elevations and things look like, we're going to try to relegate that to design standards. And maybe I'm saying there's probably going to be 2 flavors of that. Stands to reason, again, we look at the zoning map, it's all purple.
Yeah.
Right? If everything is special, nothing is special. So it's just, we gotta have a little more fine grained approach to this.
Yeah, just to add on to that too, and then in regards to the building heights and the scale of things, Sand Creek buildings being 45 feet, or buildings from the Sand Creek side being 45 feet tall, I think does fit in with the character, but that's because you have a 10 to 15 foot drop off.
Right.
And that is kind of its own little mini district potentially, and the whole, that design competition again, lots of ideas about what to do back there. It could be a really amazing space, but it's pretty unique too. So I don't know if you'd have a whole nother code for that, but it's just
Well,
something to
we
think
could
about.
do, again, it's zoning. We're trying to be aspirational with what it is that we put down in rules. So, we have the freedom to think about that and to try to design guidelines that nudge us in the direction we'd like to see. And I think building heights is, you can't be too scripted, right? You have to let the architects and designers and property owners, implement their vision, right? It's their property, but it needs to fit within this context that we're all agreeing is our responsibility to try to render down to a set of common guidelines we agree on. Building heights is going to be argued over. We're not going to, there's no other way to say it, but we'll get there. We'll get there. We're going to be measured about it, and we're going to walk through it and hear different perspectives on it. And in the end, we're going to arrive at something. I just encouraging you that all of these rules we can write and we will write, and we'll get there. And I just want to get something in front of you so we can be in reacting to it. I might even call it that, the reaction draft, because I don't want you to think that it's something we want to approve. I want to get a reaction out of people. Is this what you want?
Okay, quick question. I'm not trying to be argumentative, but assuming this is First Avenue, okay, this First Avenue, and assuming this is, let's just say, anyway, the store at the 3 stories tall. So this is 3 stories tall. Let's say that's 36 feet tall. Okay. And then you go down here and you measure. Now you can't see my pen because it's down near the creek. So there, yes, if there's a building that's only 20 feet tall here, from down here, it's going to be 60 foot. But if you say you can build to 60 foot and somebody comes up here and goes to 60 foot, then they're going to be up here in relationship to the buildings that are going to be here. And so there's going to be a view corridor. And I don't know whether we're going to try to maintain any view corridors, maybe down Cedar Street or coming up First Avenue going north. But I mean, those will come into it. But I just want to make sure that we understand that elevations in a select area, especially one substantially lower than the mean of downtown Sandpoint, which probably doesn't vary more than about 5 feet, elevations less than that being used as criteria to determine the height of buildings, I believe is really not representative of what people think it means.
So you took the bait. I'm glad you did. I purposefully went to Gunnings Alley to measure the buildings because I wanted this to come up. The code right now establishes that you can't, that's not where you measure the building height from. Yeah. It's very clear where you measure the building height from, and that's going to be on first. But I bring it up because that's an example of this is going to get specific. And I went down there, I specifically said, no, I want to go down here by the water. I want to measure how tall these buildings are because I want to see the reaction I get when I tell people, oh, yeah, it's a 60-foot tall building or 55. No, it's not. That's not what the building is at all. So that's exactly why I did that, is to further the dialogue in that, yeah, we're going to be into the weeds on this stuff. We're going to be talking about, no, where did you measure it from and why and things like that. So that's all in front of us. These are decisions that we have to make, and now's the time.
We get to make them.
That's right.
We get to make these decisions.
I have to admit, I'm confused. A moment ago, you made the statement, you're going to have a set of rules for historic preservation. And to me, that set of words suggests that there's an old building somewhere, pick it, and the owner of that building wants to make some modifications, wants to change how it looks. And your set of rules are going to ensure that it doesn't look like something from the psychedelic 70s or whatever, right? I mean, and it's gonna fit somehow without being too onerous, but that's what it is. So what if he wants to add 2 stories to the building? Or what if there's a big hole in the ground, and maybe in the future there'll be more holes in the ground, and there's no building? These historic preservation standards wouldn't apply because there's nothing to preserve. Those are holes. So the standards that I think because there's only 2 sets of standards, the other standard would be for this big blue area. I forget what that's going to be called, but that would be applied to these holes in the ground, I assume. And that would be the exact same standard as you would, I don't have the map in front of me, but blocks and blocks away where there is not, anything like the downtown. I mean, there are single family homes in some of those places.
I would call that a loophole. Where I think what the intention is, if you're in that district and you tear your building down, what gets replaced is going to be in keeping with the historic guidelines. Is we're going to write the rules such that if that happens, you're going to have to comply with these historic guidelines, which will be written in such a way there'll be provisions in there that if you're going to start from scratch, this is what you got to look like.
So the historic guidelines, not, because I took it literally. When you
That's where I envision this going, but we have commissions to work through to see if that's what they want. But I think that's what I'm hearing when I read these comp plans. What I think I'm reading is that, yeah, if a building goes down in the historic district for whatever reason, calamity of fire or whatever, what replaces it is going to be consistent with those historic guidelines.
Okay.
And those guidelines have to be written to address that eventuality.
Even if it's where Arlo's was, which is not in the historic district.
If the boundaries matter, if you're in the boundaries, here are your rules. If you're out of the boundaries, these are your rules. So when you have a historic district, we have rules. It's that simple. What do we want those rules to be? It's really no more complicated than that. The boundary was the complicated part. Trust me. That's the complicated part. And that's been, I'm going to say for the purposes of today, maybe not tomorrow, but today, that's been established in your comp plan, right? We're going to figure out what rules apply there. It's that simple. If your building falls down, what replaces it? If you want to change your windows, if you want to paint it, what rules apply? What permit do you have to get? That's it. Does that make sense? And then everything around it in that blue area, same thing, just different rules.
Okay. I'm sure I'll get back to, okay, good enough.
It's someone wants to do something with their land, the rules require you to get a permit. These are the rules. That's why I wanted to start with this conversation, because nothing springs out of the ground. Nothing springs out of the ground. You want to build a building up on Boyer, you want to build something out on Pine Street, you just don't go hire a contractor. You're going to adhere to the zoning rules. And only then is that permit going to be approved such that it can get built. Same thing with historic, we're just adding a little layer. Normally, a land use permit would be required. Now we're saying, well, in addition to just a basic land use permit that implements the standards we have on the books that Jason was talking about in terms of, how much windows, given this frontage size, all that, there's going to be this another layer that says, hey, you're in this special area. There's an additional layer here we need to participate in, and it's this other commission that's going to give you a permit after they evaluate your proposal. And then you go forward. No painting the building until it's been signed off. No changing the windows until it's been signed off. No moving the door to a metal roll up that didn't exist back with the drunk miners. It's gonna be something else. In those guidelines, really gonna spend a lot of time with the Historic Preservation Commission, who's got some unique expertise in that area, to right size those for that geography. Does that make sense? And I just want to get this stuff in front of people so we can start actually chewing on the actual materials. But everything, I want to be clear, everything's on the table. I mean, the hand is on the chess piece until it's not. And when you finally make your recommendation to council is when you've taken your hand off the chess piece. And that's going to be in several months from now, but not several years from now.
Mr. Chair.
Yeah, go
I
ahead.
had a comment just in general on the design guidelines and the review process, because I lived in Portland and worked in Portland for a few years, and they have a design overlay zone in downtown. And it is pretty onerous, and developers hate it, contractors hate the process, but they go through it kind of begrudgingly, and it adds more cost to the overall process and construction. It's just something to consider. But the outcome of that is just a much better designed, laid out city for buildings that are going to last hundreds of years, beyond this moment in time, that there is a bit of pain to get through this process. And so just, that'll be something as we move forward, I think, knowing that it'll be a painful thing to go through with design reviews, with the subjectivity that could come up throughout this next, in defining these rules and then actually assessing designs. It's a bear to take on, but I think, just there's the added value, it just kind of for generations is worth it, in my opinion. So just throwing it out there.
That sort of wraps up the main points I want to cover this evening, Chair.
Okay. And I was going to open up then for people in the audience here that would like to make some comments on this topic? Yeah.
My expectation is whatever code comes up is not going to be tit for tat if you're rehabbing an old building. It's going to be more about the essence of what's happening. And I think, Ivan, you redid the Ponderay winery building. That's a perfect example of how to take a building, rehabilitate it with the flavor of historic preservation. You did a wonderful job there. And, you know, my expectation is code is going to be crafted such that it enables those kinds of conversations and exchanges and stuff. It's not going to be, okay, that window was built exactly like that. You've got to have the exact same window. It has to function the same way, and the drunk miner has to put it in. It's not going to be like that. So that's my expectation. Thank you.
Please.
Oh, I need a sign up form.
Hello, I'm Hannah Combs. I'm with the Bonner County Historical Society and Museum. Thank you so much for giving this all of your thoughts this evening. I know this is just beginning, but I appreciate that this is on the table now. I just wanted to make one point because I think there's a lot of confusion about the existing outlines of the historic district downtown. And please correct me if I get any of this wrong, but my understanding is that that historic district is based on, there has to be a certain density of individual buildings within it that are eligible for the National Historic District. And so at the time that the last surveys were made, which I believe was in 2015, that district was laid out based on having, I think it's 70% of buildings within that outline eligible for the National Historic District. So I would note that it may be appropriate at this time to conduct another survey or at least do some more research on those buildings. I believe the baseline for eligibility for the National Historic Register is that a building be 50 years old. So since the last surveys were done 10 years ago, there may be some of those buildings on the east side of First Avenue or others in the surrounding area that are now eligible that were not eligible at the time that the district was formed. So I think it could be helpful to do a little bit more research on some of those buildings to see which ones are eligible, and it might help you create or adjust a boundary that makes more sense at this present time. I do also want to mention, just for city staff's benefit, the Historical Society and the city have a partnership agreement in which we are able to provide research services to support your efforts on furthering the arts, culture, and historic preservation master plan. So if you need any research on any individual buildings, we're happy to provide that as you move forward with this process. Thank you.
Hey, Mr. Chair, quick question, just so I understand. You're saying that the hashed area, its definition is due to the density of the number that was in that audit in 2015?
That's my understanding.
Does that sound right? I mean, it would explain it.
Yeah.
Probably, because I'm not sure even when we were looking at in the comp plan, I couldn't.
I'm not sure how the four corners of that were arrived at, but I
sounds
think they
right.
had some specialized people assisting in arriving at that before it was approved.
Yeah,
Right.
I'm just saying we can get the turban in still. It's over 50. All
Thank you.
right, thank you.
Hello, thank you. I'm Ellie Susness. I'm a longtime Sandpoint resident and the chair of the Sandpoint Arts, Culture, and Historic Preservation Commission. Thanks for tonight's discussion. I personally have been working towards the downtown Sandpoint Historic Preservation work since 2021, when the council adopted the Arts, Culture, and Historic Preservation Master Plan, which at that time combined the Arts Commission and the Historic Preservation Commission. So I'm excited to be discussing this because I know it's been on the minds of citizens and electeds of Sandpoint for decades. And I don't have to remind anyone, everyone's already mentioned it. The time is of the essence because once it's gone, it's gone. I'm glad to have City Planner Bill Dean on this because he's a very good communicator and I feel like this work with the commissions and then with the broader public, you're going to be a very useful tool to make things very well understood. And we're ready to get to work. Our commissions. I have a member of our commission here, Dara, I said it right. Dara Collison is a member of the Arts, Culture and Historic Preservation Commission. Hannah is a former member. Carrie Logan is of course a former mayor and a former historic preservation commissioner. So we're all very, very interested in working with you guys and the public and staff to make this a reality. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Anybody else out in the public would like to speak? Now's your opportunity. Keep in mind, if you're saying 50 years is how far they go back, that includes a big chunk of Sandpoint. Everything since I've been here, it's been built.
Most things in this room, in fact.
Yeah.
Yeah, thanks.
Including us.
Yeah.
I want to thank the Planning and Zoning Commission and everything. You guys did a good presentation.
Yeah, thanks to Bill. He's brought a lot of energy and knowledge, experience, and passion for this work. As you know, I'm digging through some of our documents and our internal drive here. This effort's been ongoing at least since 2019. I mean, we found presentations that were, I think, delivered to Planning and Zoning before I was on this commission, which was in late 2019. I think we've had about 4 or 5 city planners since then. So Bill is here to stay. We're going to get this done. The council has been asking monthly when this effort will begin. We recently brought in Eric Brubaker as our associate planner just 3 months ago now. We've got him handling most of the day-to-day planning. The new applications that are coming in that are going to come to you in the next 6 months are mostly going to be presented by Eric, and that's what's allowed Bill to have the time to get to work on this effort. And this is just the first of many code rewrites that are going to be coming before this commission in the next couple of years. Residential will be close behind.
Yeah,
Yep.
it's very exciting. I appreciate everybody's involvement in this. This is how we do it. I am going to give you something to chew on.
I'm not saying Sun Valley and Sandpoint have a lot in common, but we have a certain amount in common. We're cousins, maybe. You may want to look at theirs. I don't know how restrictive it is, to be honest with you, but last time I was there, I was looking at the architecture going on around town, and it looks like there are some controls.
Interestingly, just about a year ago, and in fact, we're going back in 2 weeks, Bill and I attended the Idaho chapter of the American Planning Association conference. It was in Moscow last year. And one of the sessions we attended together was a 2-hour session on historic preservation in Ketchum, Idaho, Pocatello. Interestingly, Pocatello has some of the most stringent historic preservation guidelines in the state. Meridian, probably the least stringent that we saw. Boise. So there are 4 cities involved there. Their planning directors all co-presented on this. And Ketchum's, I don't think it wasn't Sun Valley, but Ketchum has very unique approach to it. They don't have the density that we have of historic structures, but they have 24 or 27 individual structures that aren't dense. So they have 24 different historic preservation areas that are overlays that are literally structure independent to the structures that they have identified. And I was in Ketchum recently, and I noticed one of the projects they highlighted was the old. It's where I think they filled bullet casings or something. It was the old armory that is now, now it's now been refurbished as a bar, but the effort to protect that historic structure turned into this beautiful brewery, bar, tap room type structure that without those guidelines, that building would have been demolished. It was brought up in that presentation, and I was excited over my spring break to go actually check that brewery out and just see the results of really good historic preservation efforts in Ketchum. So we learned a lot from that. I'm assuming there's probably going to be some more historic preservation presentations at the conference we go to in 2 weeks from now.
Yeah, I like it. Don't make war, make beer. Count me in.
I mean, one of our greatest historic preservation, efforts in Sandpoint has been the McDuff's Beer Hall as well.
It's
In
nice.
addition to the Ponderay Winery building. So we've got some really good examples here, Orchid Award winning examples in Sandpoint of historic preservation. So the train station, yeah, we know how to do it in Sandpoint. We've got a lot of Orchid Award winners here in town. That's the State Historic Preservation Society's annual award that we've received on several occasions in Sandpoint.
Well, is there anything else the staff would like to share tonight? Okay, no, sir. Anything from the commission? Any further thoughts, ideas, comments on anything? Okay. Hearing none, then I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
Okay, been moved and
Second.
seconded to adjourn.
At 6:40 PM, correct?
6:40, yes, thank you. You can see the clock easier than I can.
What was meridian? What's there to preserve a meridian?
I have no idea.